I said he traffics in anti-Semitism.
Okay.
Yeah, what's in his heart, I don't know.
Why do you think he wanted to move the capital to Jerusalem?
Because I think he thinks it's good politics. He has a misguided...
Oh, come on,
there's a long history of people who are pro-Israel and anti-Semitic. They're not mutually exclusive.
So let's take some time and talk about the other October surprise I didn't get to from last week, and the more important issue of the media's atrocious handling of the ordeal. Now, if a rash of bombs being sent to politicians wasn't crazy enough, just as reports of the bomber's arrest broke, news of a new shooting spread. Richard Bowers had attacked the Tree of Life synagogue, leaving 11 dead. In the wake of this news, though, what did the media do? Did it pause to pay respect to those who died? Did it ask hard questions about the state of a society that creates these kind of horrors? Or what could have been done to prevent it? Maybe something about the overprescription of certain drugs? No, it spun the incident to fit its favorite narratives. The media's absolute favorite, gun control, only reared its head for a little while before Trump shot it down, sent them on a tizzy that distracted them. Well, again, this has little to do with it if you take a look. If they had protection inside, the results would have been far better. This is a dispute that will always exist, I suspect. If they had some kind of protection inside the temple, maybe it could have been a very much different situation. They didn't, and he was able to do things that unfortunately he shouldn't have been able to do. Now, this may sound reasonable to normal people, but it was enough to send the media running and screaming. Well, can you guess what they were screaming? That's right, victim blaming. He didn't explicitly blame the victims, but the implication wasn't subtle. In the president's mind, the onus was on the Tree of Life synagogue in Squirrel Hill to maintain armed security inside the house of worship in preparation for a possible gunman. As a side note, is that not a run-on sentence? I mean, come on. Whether the media was actually too distracted by these statements or they were really just happy to take up another line of attack, the narrative quickly shifted to the people of Pittsburgh's dissatisfaction with Trump over the shooting.
This president's own words, his message of hate and fear, are what made him unwelcome by some, many in Pittsburgh today. The progressive Jewish group, Bend the Arc, in an open letter signed by more than 35,000 people, told this president he is not welcome until he denounces white nationalism and stops his assaults on immigrants and refugees.
So Don Lemon would have you believe that Jewish leaders didn't want Trump in the city. What was that organization, Bend the Arc? Now, who are they? So, is Bend the Arc really a group of Jewish leaders? Only a name. The group is merely a leftist political action group with a Jewish label. Their stated mission is rising up in solidarity with everyone threatened by the Trump agenda. Their missions include the election of progressive champions and the implementation of progressive legislation and policies like criminal justice reform and economic equality. Who runs Bend the Arc? Alexander Soros, George Soros' son.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me!
Come on, guys, seriously? The left claims incessantly that George Soros' influence in politics is overstated. So what do? They use a press release from an organization run by his son that is explicitly anti-Trump as evidence of what average people think. Yet they call us conspiracy theorists. So what we know now is that Soros and his political groups don't like Trump. But is that actually the truth on the ground? If we only knew what, for instance, the doctors who helped the injured thought.
Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all very much. No, thank you, sir.
The best.
Great job.
Thank you, Mr. President. We love you.
Wow, we love you. Yeah, they just hate his guts, huh? So gun control fell by the wayside as the media tried to use left-wing groups to attack Trump's likability directly. This all failed, of course. The media have proven they're inept and can't do anything right. But that did not stop them from using the shooter's motivations, particularly the beliefs that Jews were financing the deportation of migrants in the United States, to attack Trump and what the right have been saying about the migrant caravan. The strategy became to tacitly blame the right wing for the shooting, despite the fact that the shooter did not like Donald Trump.
Kellyanne Conway despicably today goes on national television and she said, well, this shooter's motives were because there's an anti-religious sentiment. No, ma'am. The propaganda industry that she commands with the vile president that she serves, abetted by Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh and Breitbart and Newsbusters and Judicial Watch and all the rest of them, have blood on their hands.
Oh, nice. Be sure to call it Mark Levin. Like they say, you have to be sure to name the Jew in these situations. Oh, Jesus, what a parody. I would recommend, however, following everyone he just listed off. You'll be smarter for it. But even blaming a Jew for anti-Semitic shootings did not top the absurdity of Julia Ioffe.
You know, this president, one of the things that he really launched his presidential run on is talking about Islamic radicalization. And this president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did.
What? What the fuck?
Now that was so out of left field, even Simone Sanders flinched a little.
This president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did.
She did apologize for saying that Trump radicalized more people than ISIS, but I don't believe she's actually sorry. Not that I think she believes it, but I don't think that she actually cares what she has to say to smear and slander this president. In fact, the media as a whole is willing to push a reckless narrative about the increase in anti-Semitism at the hands of the alt-right, which you should read as Trump supporters. However, that is not the whole story. The ADL statistic doesn't just include actual anti-Semitic incidents, as Bernstein wrote at Tablet magazine, but any incident that results in Jews perceiving themselves as being victimized due to their Jewish identity. This goes back to the bomb threats. The threats may have been made to Jewish institutions, but it was not actually due to anti-Semitism. The ADL report also includes 204 anti-Semitic incidents that occurred on college campuses, nearly double the amount in 2016. But the ADL doesn't distinguish between members of the alt-right and leftist pro-Palestinian anti-Israel activism. Bernstein also points out that even though the ADL counts an overall surge of anti-Semitic incidents, actual physical assaults against the Jewish community dropped 47%. So not only do the numbers simply reflect a feeling of hate rather than actual hateful action, they also show that actual physical crime is down. Now, wouldn't you want to highlight that so as not to drive an unnecessary sense of panic? Nah. They also pretend like all the incidents are coming from one direction, even though the reports themselves make no such distinction. But that is garden variety dishonesty, nothing new there. But again, if there was someone on the ground, a victim maybe, that could lend a guiding voice, maybe give this conversation a center or a constructive direction, maybe the rabbi could say a few words, but then again, maybe that would destroy the media narrative.
Do you blame anyone for what happened there at the Tree of Life beyond the gunman?
I don't really foist blame upon any person. Hate does not know religion, race, creed, political party. It's not a political issue in any way, shape, or form. Hate does not know any of those things. It exists in all people.
If it wasn't enough for the media to exploit the strategy to attack Trump, they also used a related line of attack to demonize a long-standing thorn in their side, Gab.
For a long time, before he allegedly killed 11 people, we do know on Saturday morning at that Pittsburgh synagogue, 46-year-old Robert Bowers had been active on social media, particularly on a social media app called Gab. Bowers used the site to post angry anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant comments.
And if you thought that was ridiculous, just wait to hear what her guest says about free speech.
Is what Gab is allowing on its platform, is this free speech, Dan?
Yes, absolutely. But go ahead and lie anyway.
Well, it's kind of wrapping the moniker of free speech around hate speech. And look, expressions of anti-Semitism, racism, sexism, homophobia, these are not, air quote, free speech.
Look, Chucklehead, you have to be deliberately misinforming your audience. If there is one issue the Supreme Court has come close to a consensus on, it's free speech. It takes no time at all to look at the case law and find that almost anything is free speech. The most vile, hateful stuff is explicitly protected precisely because that is the speech that needs protection. If you looked at the case law, you would find there's no such thing as hate speech as a legal category either.
In fact, these are expressions of bigotry and very clearly anti-American. These are indisputably the ideas of repression, the opposite of free speech.
No, the opposite of free speech is prior restraint. Again, if you knew the constitutional case law, you wouldn't say something as stupid as repressive speech is the opposite of free speech. They are anti-American? Well, maybe, but that isn't a reason you can punish them. I mean, you aren't arguing for sedition laws, are you? These are just a bunch of buzzwords that don't mean anything and have zero bearing on whether something is protected speech.
These ideas repress and are designed to shut down truly American ideas like the freedom to worship and celebrate your religion without the threat or actual violence.
Now you are directly conflating threats or speech with violence, which is action. You do have a right to live free of violence, but speech is not violence. The only speech you have a legal right to live free of is speech with a specific call to action or speech that reaches a very specific standard for defamation. You have no right to be protected from mean words.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive.
I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
now, as silly as this line of attack might seem to you or I, this is actually part of a ongoing effort from left-wing activists to bring down Gab and any other platform that even lends an alternate voice to the leftist echo chamber. And they were actually successful in this, at least for a little bit. Indeed, Gab is back up better than ever, or at least their infrastructure. Gab's ICO is a vivid demonstration of blockchain's ability to let people raise money anonymously outside of mainstream financing. But Gab and others now have access to even more powerful tools that could make centralized servers, domain managers, and much of the internet infrastructure as we know it obsolete. In other words, come at us, bro. The media, however, was incensed that it was not successful in smearing Trump, and seeing the caravan still did not have widespread support. Interesting that they're so concerned about that. Don Lemon went in hard on the identity politics angle.
So we have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right. And we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There is no ban on, they had the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. So what do we do about that?
He attempts to deflect from concerns over illegals and tries to make up for the failure of the media to pin anti-Semitism to white right-wingers with a flatly racial attack. We shouldn't demonize people, proceeds to demonize white men. I wonder, does that mean Don doesn't think white men are people? So let's follow your logic down that rabbit hole, Don. Despite making up 13% of the population, blacks commit around half of the homicides in the United States. DOJ statistics show that between 1980 and 2008, blacks committed 52% of the homicides compared to 45% of homicides committed by whites. From 2011 to 2013, 38.5% of people arrested for murder, manslaughter, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault were black. This figure is 3 times higher than the 13% black population figure. When you account for the fact that black males aged 15 to 34, who account for around 3% of the population, are responsible for the vast majority of these crimes, the figures are even more staggering. So given the majority of murder is committed by blacks, should we do something about them? They are disproportionately responsible for violent crime. Any racial conclusions you want to base on that? So when Julia Ioffe claims Trump has radicalized more people than ISIS, she apologizes. What do you think Don Lemon does? Did you say double down?
Earlier this week, I made some comments about that in a conversation with Chris. I said that the biggest terror threat in this country comes from radicals on the far right, primarily white men. That angered some people. But let's put emotion aside and look at the cold, hard facts. The evidence is overwhelming. A recent report from the Government Accountability Office shows that. Even though more people died in attacks connected to Islamic extremists, the vast majority of deadly attacks in this country from 2001 to 2016 were carried out by far-right violent extremists.
Here come the same old stats that are always used. Like the wage gap, bad stats are fine as long as they support the conclusion. Alright, Don, let's talk about the GAO stats. One of the issues with the GAO dataset is that it includes highly suspect incidents. For example, it accounts 4 attacks where neo-Nazis killed pedophiles in prison as terrorist attacks. These 4 incidents count 4 times as much as the ISIS-inspired Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando last year that killed 49, the worst terror attack since 9/11. So as far as we know, the GAO stats suggest more neo-Nazis killed pedophiles than radical Muslims killed people. And not even that, just that there are more separate instances, not that the Muslim radical killed fewer people.
The nonpartisan think tank New America looked at attacks in this country after 9/11 and going up to the attack in Charlottesville. They found that of the domestic terror attacks, those not carried out by jihadists, 68 were by far-right groups. Only 8 were by left-wing or black separatist groups.
New America, you say? The only way to conjure up a right-wing terrorism boogeyman is to count by fatal incident and not by the actual number killed. That being said, as I noted here on PJ Media more than a year ago, there are serious issues with how New American counts acts of terrorism. Since when are bank robberies acts of terrorism? They aren't, unless you're trying to inflate your right-wing terror stats to mislead the public for political motives. I also noted that, in addition to 9/11, several Islamic terror attacks are simply left off the count, such as the DC sniper case. In 2012 in Houston, in 2 separate incidents in January and in November, 2 people were shot to death by a Muslim extremist for their roles in his daughter's conversion to Christianity. In March 2013 in Ashtabula, Ohio, a Muslim convert walked into a Christian church during an Easter service and killed his father, claiming it was the will of Allah. In August of 2014 in Richmond, California, a man killed an Ace Hardware employee by stabbing him 17 times, claiming he was on a mission from Allah. So again, we are not actually counting how deadly these attacks were, and it appears we aren't even counting some attacks at all. But these are apparently what the left considers scientific data sets. Personally, I don't think it is useful to try and blame terrible actions on objectionable speech, but if the left wants to play that game, game on.
So there's been a lot of talk in the media about where anti-Semitic attacks are coming from. And the statement by Don Lemon is that anti-Semitism is largely coming from white supremacists across the country. As somebody who speaks on campuses on a regular basis, and I speak with Jews a lot more frequently than Don Lemon does, okay, then I can tell you that Jews on campus are not feeling the heat from white supremacists. Jews on campus are feeling the heat from mainstream leftists and their allies in the Muslim Student Association, for example. That's where they are actually feeling the heat.
Jewish groups on college campuses suffer harassment at the hands of professors. They face threats from student groups endorsed by the college and its administration. Colleges openly fund organizations that are anti-Israel or plain anti-Semitic, while showing lenience to the same groups when they violate the rules. But I'm sure that's all the fault of those conservative professors and college administrators. Or how about the very recent vandalization of a New York synagogue? Surely just another example of the wave of right-wing, white supremacist anti-Semitism, except the perpetrator was a black Democrat. On Friday afternoon, police in New York arrested 26-year-old James Polite, a Brooklyn man accused of vandalizing a synagogue with anti-Semitic graffiti. The young man in that profile, who self-identified as queer, grew up in the foster care system and grew up to volunteer for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. He eventually found work with Christine Quinn while she was a city council speaker. He also worked on Quinn's unsuccessful campaign for mayor. See, now, I thought it was only possible for white people to be anti-Semitic. Hell, I thought white people were the only ones who could be any racist of any kind. At least that's what I've been told. Now, where could a diverse gentleman like this get these terrible ideas?
Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you're screaming Leo. Farrakhan is on the fringe. The right has David Duke, you disingenuous prick. There's no reason a mainstream Democrat would be seen with Farrakhan. James Polite was an Obama supporter. Obama doesn't have anything to do with Farrakhan. Well, yes, I'm sure there's no evidence at all, tying Farrakhan to anyone in the mainstream Democrat Party. The reality is politicians on the left hobnob with Farrakhan far too regularly to be dismissed. A Republican gives a speech in the same building as David Duke. He's attacked as a racist. But nothing on the left ever gets called out. And the sadder reality is, this kind of blame game is not going to solve any problems. This guy didn't shoot up a synagogue because Donald Trump dog whistled to him. If you want people to stop indulging in conspiracies, I would suggest to the media that they do a better job telling the truth. Anything the media says, I'm inclined to believe the opposite, and that is actually the media's fault. That is actually something they could fix. But that isn't what they're interested in. Attacking Trump is. And so they continue to distort reality and gaslight in an attempt to tear down Trump. And it drives crazy people to believe crazy things because they can't believe you. We are the Republic's walls. Come and take it.